Beautiful work. We have our basic setup in the cart page. And now, of course, we would need to handle if we have some items in the cart. Now, the gotcha in this case is going to be that every time we set up something in our component, we'll have to manually add that item to the cart because we're not persisting the data. So before we start working on the return on the JSX, I actually would want to set up the functionality where every time there's a change with our cart, I would want to invoke the use effect and I would want to save our current cart in the local storage. So if you take a look, I already have, of course, since I'm using the final application, but I'm just going to clear it. And if, of course, you don't have anything beautiful, that is what you should see. So you have local storage and we'll just persist that data between the renders. And that way, once we add a few items to the cart, then we can just nicely work on return and we don't have to go back every time to add a new item just to see some small changes. And again, that's something we have already done before. So we have the cart context and I have my placeholder functions and right in the bottom, or you can do it, I don't know, wherever you want, basically. I'm going to go with my use effect and I'm going to invoke it every time there's a change in my cart. So I'm going to go with state and cart. And I simply would want to grab my cart value and set up the item in the local storage. And yes, of course, every time something changes, I'm just grabbing that latest value and then I'm overriding the value in the local storage. So we go with local storage, then set item, and then we needed to pass in two things. What is the key name? In my case, I'm going to go with cart. And then the second thing is the value. Now remember that we can only store strings over there. And that's why we'll go with JSON and then stringify, and I'll set up my state cart. And everything is going to work beautifully. But remember that there's going to be a case where user just navigates away from the page altogether. So when he or she comes back, when we initialize the cart, I also would want to check my local storage first. So let me show you that, of course, this is going to work. The moment we have empty cart, nothing is there. But if we go to the products, and for example, if I go to this high bench again, and if I go with this one, check it out. Now, of course, I have the key and I have the value. And we're almost ready to start working on our cart content. But every time we'll make a change, we'll still start from the scratch because our cart is just an empty array by default. That's why we'll scroll up here and create a function that checks whether we have the item in local storage by the name of cart. If we do, then I would want to set up my cart equal to that. If not, it's still going to be an empty array. So we're going to go here with const and I'll name this get local storage. That's my function. And we're going to go with let cart is equal to local storage. And as a side note, remember that this is just a browser API. That's why we have such a free access to it. So I'm setting up my cart equal to a local storage get item and then cart. And I'm just checking for the value. If there's something there, then I would want to return whatever I have in local storage and set it equal to the cart. If not, it's just going to be empty array. And by the way, yes, you can write it as a one-liner. There's just some cases where I like to go a bit more explicit because I think that it is easier for everyone to understand. So in here, I'll say if cart, so if there's something there, because if there's nothing there, then I'm just going to get undefined, and then we'll right away go to else, where I'm returning a empty array. Or if the item exists, the cart item, then I'm just going to go with return. Again, now I would want to parse it since we stored it as a string, but now I would want to parse it back. And then we pass in the local storage, get item, and then we set up the cart. And where we initialize the state, now I'm going to say get local storage, and I'm just going to invoke it. So that way, once we actually add the item, even when we refresh the page, we should see the cart content because we're persisting our data between the renders. And if you don't believe me, you can go and add another item here. And we'll just say here 5, for example, and we're adding it to the cart. And now I can see that I have 2 items in the cart. And again, we're just doing that because I don't want to repeat the same steps every time we make a small change in our return.